What's up, you wonderful people on YouTube? Today, I want to quickly give you a crash course on getting started with Strapi 4. I love Strapi, and I hope you will too. If you're a new developer or you've been developing for a while and just looking to find the fastest way to create a backend for your front-end project, in my opinion, Strapi is the best. So without any ado, let's get started. Let's say you need a backend for your front-end website. Here's a basic design that we're going to use. It has a couple of components. It has a hero section, it has our features section, it has our pricing plan section, and then it has our contact information. So today I'm going to show you how to set this data structure up in your Strapi application, so then you could make an API call to retrieve this data for your website. In the following videos, I'll show you how to create this front end as well. So let's take a look how to get started with Strapi. We could navigate to strapi.io and you could learn more about everything that Strapi has to offer. The best part about Strapi is that it allows you to build applications fast. It's open source, highly customizable. You could either self-host it or use Strapi Cloud, and it both supports REST or GraphQL. Another awesome part about it is that as a beginner, you could get started with Strapi out of the box literally in 2 minutes, like we'll see. But if you're a more advanced developer and like to customize Strapi even farther, you can do that as well. To get started, let's click the Get Started button here. It's going to take us to our documentation. Make sure that you have one of the Node versions supported. I'm going to be using Node version 18. And if we scroll down here, it'll show us the command that we need. So we're going to use npm create Strapi app at latest with our project name quick start. So I'm going to copy this. And in my terminal, I'm going to add the command. Then I'm going to put the name. I'm going to say from 0 to hero. And let's do quick start flag. This is going to set up Strapi with the basic settings, which is going to set it up to use SQLite, which is perfect for our local development. Click enter. It's going to go ahead and do its magic. Click yes to proceed. And it's going to go ahead and set up Strapi for you locally. Once it's done, it's going to automatically open the window where you need to create your first admin user. So let's wait for this to finish up, and I'll catch up with you once this is done. You should now see this Welcome to Strapi screen. Let's go ahead and create our first admin user. I'm going to say paul.bratslavsky@strapi.io. monkey123, why not? That's a very secure password. And let's click the check if you'd like to be updated with all the cool things that are coming with Strapi. Let's click Let's Start. And what type of work you do, it might ask you. I'm a front-end developer, so let's click Finish. And here we are inside our admin panel. So let's take a quick overview over our Strapi admin panel. Here we're going to have our content manager where we could manage all of our content types. Currently, we just have a user, which is automatically created by default. Next, we have our content type builder. There's 3 types of content that you could create. You could make collection types, which includes anything that you're going to have more than one. For instance, products, services, pages, blog posts, what have you. We also have our single type, and single type is something that you're just going to have one thing of. Like I'm going to have a global settings page for my website, which is going to have the information that pertains to my navigation and my footer. That's a great use case of a single type. You could have your pages be single types as well, like a home page, about us page, or 404 page, but you could also do that as a collection type. And we'll take a look more into the distinction as we start working. And lastly, we have our components. Components are a great way for you to create reusable components that you could reuse in your application. For instance, you could have a link button, which would be a component. Another great example of a component is a metadata component, which could have, let's say, your meta title, meta description, and your meta image. So components is a great way to organize certain data structures together, like metadata or user's bio and so on. And we'll talk more about the use case of components as we continue with the application. And here we have our media library where you're going to see all your files, images, and so on stored in your Strapi application. When you set up your Strapi application locally, all these images are saved to your file system. But once you deploy your application, we recommend that you use either SW3 bucket or a service like Cloudinary. We could also take a look at plugins. Here you'll see all the plugins that are currently installed by default. You could also add additional plugins, or you could even build your own plugin yourself. You could see some of the plugins that others have created inside the Strapi marketplace. And finally, let's take a look at the settings. There's lots of different options here, but the two that we're going to look at are administration panel users and a user permission plugin. Strapi has two different types of users. You have your administration panel users, and I am currently a user who's logged into our administration panel. As you could see, I have super admin rights. I could go ahead and invite new users and give them different roles. You could also create new roles. So on the roles, we currently start with author, editor, super admin. You create new roles and you could assign different permissions to different content types. And this will manage the access that the users have within your Strapi administration panel. But you also have a front-end facing website. So you may have your Strapi backend, but you also have your Next.js or Remix powered website that is serving your content. So an example would be, let's say I have an e-commerce store, and on my front end, you could create an account. You can pick items that you want to buy. You could add them to your shopping cart, and all of that interaction is controlled through user permissions plugin. So those are the users that are created through the front-facing website, where your administration panel are users who directly interact with your Strapi backend. I know it might seem a little bit confusing at first, but if you have any questions, let me know below and I'll clarify them. But to summarize, administration panel users are people who have access to your Strapi backend through this admin panel, and user permission plugin are any users that do not have access to your admin panel, but instead interact with your application through the front end. Oh my gosh, that was a mouthful. So now let's build our first collection type. Our website is going to have many different landing pages that could pertain to different products, different services. So we want to give the content editors ability to dynamically generate those landing pages based the components that we're going to pre-build. Looking at this basic design here, we could see that we have a couple of different sections, and you could add as many sections as you like. But for this example, it's going to consist of our hero section. It's going to have our benefits. We're also going to have our pricing component, and we're going to also have our call to action. And the goal here is for the website editor to be able to organize these in any order with any data that they want. So let's start by creating our first landing page. So here in my content type builder, I'm going to create a new collection type. We're going to call it landing page. Let's create continue. We're going to talk about all the different fields that you could choose from. We have our text, rich text, the number, date, Boolean, email, password, enumeration, where you could have a couple of different options, and JSON. Those are called our top level fields, which I'll tell you what they are in just a little bit, which also includes our unique ID. And then we also have our media, our relations, components, and dynamic zones. These are all relations that function slightly different than our top level fields like our text, but I'll show you what I mean by that once we get to it. So let's first create a new field to our page. Our page is going to have a title. Let's create another field. We're going to again select text. We're going to say description, and that's going to be a long text. And then we're going to add another field, which is going to be unique ID, and that's going to be related to our title, and we're going to call it a slug. So let's create finish, click save. Once everything is saved, we created our first landing page collection type. So let's go to our content manager. Now we are able to create a new entry. This is going to have a title I'll call Strapi, description, Strapi landing page, and the slug is going to be Strapi. So let's click save. Make sure that you publish your page. And now let's go into your settings, and we're going to get access to the page through our front-end application. Currently, I don't have a front-end application built, so instead we're going to use a service like Insomnia, or you could use Postman. But for us to be able to access this page via our API, we need to go to roles and give it public access. So here's a landing page. We're going to be able to find all or find one, click save. And here it shows us the endpoint that we want to hit in order to get our page. So I'm going to open Insomnia. So with Insomnia, I am going to make a GET request to the endpoint that we have. Click send. And here you see that we're now able to have our data from our landing page, which is awesome. Notice how quickly we were able to add data and have a working backend from which we are able to request data. So now let's go ahead and build our first component. Inside our landing page, we want to make sure that we are able to have meta information to pass to our front end that we could use for SEO. So we can go into our content type builder and create a new component. I'm going to call it metadata. Next, we need to add a category to which it belongs. I'm going to say SEO, click create and click continue. Our metadata component is going to have 3 items. It's going to have our meta title, which is text. Then let's add another field. Again, we're going to click text, but this time it's going to be long text. We're going to say meta description, and let's click another field, and it's going to have one media. We're going to say single. Under advanced settings, so we're going to only allow images. Back to basics. Let's give it a title, meta image, and click finish. And now we have our meta component. Let's click save. And we could add that component to our landing page by clicking add another field. Let's click component. Let's say using the existing component, select the component. We're going to click single component because we only want it once on our page. Let's select metadata. And here we're going to give it a name, and we're going to call it metadata and click finished. So now we have our metadata component. Let's click save. And now let's go to our content manager. Within our landing page, we're going to click plus to add our metadata information. I'm going to say strapi landing page, and the description is going to be strapi landing page as well. I'm not very original. Let's add an image, add a new asset, browse files. I'm just going to pick a random image that I have, click open, upload assets, and finish. And now we added our metadata information. I'm going to click save. And remember something I told you about our top level fields? I said that our text, rich text, number, date, Boolean, JSON, enum, password, email are top level fields, where our media, dynamic zones, components, and relations are all relations and are treated a little bit differently in Strapi. And what that means, when we go and make that API request right now and click send, notice how none of the relationships appear. And that's by design. This is designed to allow you to specify what things you want to populate when you're requesting your data. That's going to help you to prevent underfetching or overfetching. So if I want to get all those relationships and a component is a relationship, I need to specifically populate them. So we're going to Google Strapi query building tool. Let's click enter, interactive query builder. So here we're going to add the endpoint that we want. We are going landing pages. So what I'm going to do is clean this up, and we're going to start fresh. So I'm going to use Populate, and we're going to use an array notation, and I'll talk more about it as we go along. And I'll also share an excellent resource that you could use on top of our documentation to clarify this for you, especially when you're new. This may seem a little bit complex, but it really isn't once you find out how to do this. So let's take a look at our content type builder. We want to populate our metadata and our meta image. So using our array notation, we could type the name of the component, metadata, and then dot meta image. Now we're going to copy this query. So now let's update the query params and click send. And now notice we're populating everything, including our title, description, slug, and our metadata, where we're getting the meta title, meta description, and we're getting the meta image. And like said before, when you're starting out, this may seem a little bit complex, but I'm going to share with you an article that I wrote. You could find it on our Strapi website on their blog, and it's called Demystifying Strapi Populate and Filtering. I'm also going to add it to the description of this video so you can see everything you need to know to simplify and demystify how the populate and filtering works. With that being said, the difference between our top level fields, which basically are non-relational fields, and versus our relations. For relations, you need to specify specifically the things that you want to populate. The reason why we do this is similar to GraphQL, is within REST to give you ability to only get the data that you ask for. And this prevents underfetching and overfetching. And because you're only getting the data that you want, that means you're able to keep your apps more performant. So now that I have a new t-shirt and my hair looks slightly better, let's go ahead and take a look at which component to create next. So we could create our hero section, we could create our benefits, we could create our pricing, we could also create our call to action. But one thing that I want to bring your attention to, notice how we have a couple of different buttons, which will be links that you will find on our page. Maybe we should have a component for our button first. I think that makes sense because we could reuse it in all the other different sections where we need it. So let's create our button component. Looking at our button, we know that we have two different colors and it could be primary or secondary. So we need to take that into account. Also, we need to have text placeholder for the text within the button. Next, you have to think about, is this going to be external link or internal link? For instance, do we want to link to our page on our website or redirect user to a completely different website? Something to take into consideration. So let's go ahead within our Strapi application and start building this component. Under content type builder, I'm going to create new component and I'm going to call it button link. And we're going to create a new category called elements and click continue. So we know our button is going to have a title. Then our button also going to have a link. We also want to tell if we want that link to be external or internal. So we could use a Boolean for that. I'm going to call is external. And for this, we're going to go to advanced settings. By default, we want it to be false. Let's go back to basic settings. Click add another field. And the last field, we're going to add enums, which will give us options. So we're going to call this type and we're going to say primary, secondary, and click finish. So now we have a button. It's going to have our title, the link to where we want to navigate when that button is clicked. Is it external or internal? And then type. So let's click save. Great. Now we have a button link component that we could reuse in many different pages where we need a button. So next, let's go ahead and create our next component, which is our hero section. So building out our hero section, we're going to have 4 different fields. First is going to be our heading. Next is going to be our text. And both of these are going to be our text fields. Then we're going to have our link, which is going to be our link button component. And then we're going to have an image, which is going to be in relation to our image. So let's look in Strapi how to get this done. So in Strapi, let's click Content Builder. Let's create a new component and we're going to call it Hero. Let's add it to a section and the section is going to be blocks. Let's click Create Blocks, our new category, click Continue. And now we're going to add our text, which is going to be heading. Let's click another field. Again, we're going to use the text field and we're going to do long text. It's going to be our text. And let's add another field. This is going to be our component. So let's click on component. We're going to use existing component that we created before. Let's select our component. It's going to be single component and it's going to be our button link. And we're going to call this link. And let's add another field. And finally, it's going to be our image. And we're just going to call it image. We're going to give it single type. And we're going to make sure that under advanced settings, we only allow images to be embedded. Let's click finish and save. Now that we created our component, let's go into our landing page. We're going to use something called dynamic zones, which allows us to give our admin user option to decide which components they want to display on the page. So let's hit add another field to this collection type. Let's click dynamic zones. We're going to call it blocks, add component to the zone. We're going to use an existing component. Let's select a component and it's going to be our hero section. Let's click finished and save. Now when we go to our content manager, click on our landing page. Notice how we have all of our previous data that we did, including our metadata component. But if we scroll, we have this area where now we're able to add blocks to build our landing page. I could click plus button and notice we have an option and we only have one component, which is a hero section. So if you click on the hero, you're able to add your hero section here. So let's go ahead and add something. Welcome to Strapi. Strapi is the best. Let's add our link. Our title is going to be learn more and it's going to link to our Strapi website.io. And remember, we gave this option. Do we want this be an external or internal link? So this is going to be external. So we're going to hit true. And the button is going to be primary. And let's add an image. I'm just going to use the same image as before. Finish and save. So now we created our hero section within our landing page. Before we see how to populate everything, let's finish out and build our next section, which is going to be benefits. So now let's create our benefits section. But looking at this, I'm realizing that this could be more generic. Instead of a benefits section, this could be something else. So instead of calling benefits, let's just think of this as a row component that has multiple of cards. And each card has an image, a heading, and a text area. This way you could reuse it in multiple areas of your application. So within Strapi, let's click on Content Type Builder and create our first new component. This is going to be our single card. We're going to add it to our elements and click Continue. Each card is going to consist of an image. So let's click Media. Let's call it Image. We're going to use single media. Under Advanced Setting, let's only allow images. Now let's add our next field. Our next field is going to be our heading. So we're going to use our text field, heading. Let's click Add Another field. Again, we're going to use our text field. This time it's going to be long text, and this is going to be description. Perfect. Let's click Finish and Save. Now that we have our card component, let's go ahead and create our row component. So create a new component. We're going to call it row. Our row is going to live inside blocks, and our row is going to consist of our card components. So let's click on the component. We're going to use an existing component. Let's select our component. It's going to be repeatable because our row could have multiple of cards. We're going to call this our card. Let's select our component, which is going to be our card component. Let's click Finish. And now you could see we have a row component that consists of our card, which is a repeatable component. This allows us to add as many cards as we like. Now we need to add it to our landing page. Click on the landing page, scroll down to our blocks, click Add Component. We're going to use our existing component. Let's select our row component and finish. Click Save. Now when we go back to our content manager, under our landing pages, let's select our first landing page. When we scroll down and click on Add Component, you see now we have our second component, which is our row. So let's click it and let's add 3 cards to our new row component. I'm going to click Add, click on the image. I'm going to use the same image. Card 1, some text. Let's add another card, same image. Card 2, some text. And let's add our final card using the same image. Card 3, description, some text. And let's save. So let's close down some of these blocks that we have. And now we could see our landing page is taking shape. Yes, now we're going to move on to our landing page. Yes, I'm wearing a new shirt and I didn't even bother fixing my hair. It's okay because the landing page here is important. Did I say landing page? We're working on the pricing page. Oh my goodness. So here on my screen, I have the pricing page. And what we're going to do, we're going to create this component. It's going to have a couple of different parts. One is going to have a single card that's going to have a relation to our services. It's going to have our pricing, data, the type of plan it is. Notice how the middle is purple because that's our featured plan. So we'll have a flag is featured to account for that. And we're also going to utilize our button component. I'm going to show you that there's going to be one minor issue that we're going to run into that I'm going to show you how to solve as well. And that's by design. So let's jump right into it. So first things first, within our Strapi app, let's go inside our content builder and we're going to create a new collection type. We're going to call it service. We're going to click continue and it's just going to have the name of the service, and let's add another field and it's going to have a description for our service. Click finish. Now go ahead and click the edit button. We're going to go to advanced settings and we're going to disable the draft and publish, which means that whenever we save, it's going to publish automatically. We won't have to hit the publish button. For this case, it makes sense. Yes, click yes, disable, click finish. Now that it's done, let's go ahead and add a couple of services. So under Content Manager, under Service, create new service. We're going to call it Service 1. Let's copy and paste this. Save. And we're going to create a couple of more services. Create new entry. Service 2. Save. Let's create another. We're going to do 5 of them, by the way. Just if you're wondering, I'm going to just tell you, you're going to wait until I create 5 services, just so we have some options. And let's create 2 more. Create new entry, service 4. And again, this could be any service that you're offering, but for the sake of this example, I'm giving it very generic names. And let's create one new one. Boom. We're going to say 5. Okay, sounds good. And fantastic. So now we have our 5 services created. Next, looking at our pricing page, let's go ahead and build our card. We're going to call it pricing card because it's going to have our pricing information on it with all the services and the button. That makes perfect sense. So we're going to go under Content Builder. We're going to click Create a New Component, and we're going to call it Pricing Card. We're going to save it under Elements, click Continue, and our card is going to have the plan type, the plan price, our services, and our button. So let's go ahead and add those. For plan type, we're just going to have it as a string, and we're going to call it plan type. Let's click add another field. We're going to represent the cost instead of numbers. We just represent it as a string. Perfectly fine for this example. Plan price. Let's click add another field. We also want to define which plan is featured. If you see on my front end here, the purple is the recommended. So how do we tell our front end, hey, this is the featured plan, make it purple? We're going to use a Boolean. So click on Boolean, and we're going to say is featured. And in the advanced settings, we're going to set the default value as false. Let's click finish. Finally, let's add another field, which is going to be relation, and it's going to be services. And we make sure that we point to our service, and we're going to have has many. Click finish. And the last component we want to add is our button link. So let's use an existing component, select component. We're going to just call it a link, and it's going to be our button link, and it's going to be a single component. Click finish and save. Now that we have our pricing card, let's create a parent component that we're going to call pricing, that's going to have all those cards in it, or allow the user to create new cards, as well as other additional information. So let's create a new component, and we're going to call it pricing. Let's save it under blocks and click continue. And we're going to add a text, which is going to be a name, and add another field, which is going to be text description. And this is something that you may want to show on your front end or not, but I'm just going to add these fields with a specific reason here. Click finish. Now we want to add our cards, which are repeatable components. So when I go to add another component and I click add components and I say use an existing component and I go select components, and notice that our pricing card doesn't show up. And the reason why is because our pricing card actually has nested components in it. So let me show you what I mean. Let me close this out. Okay, let me save what I have. And if we take a look at our pricing card, notice how we have a link, which is a component. And by default, Strapi only allows you to have 2 level deep nested components. So we are not able to add this card from the admin. So let me show you how we could add this card programmatically. And the reason why we do this is because the more nested your components are, the more performance hit you may take, especially if you start going 2 levels, 3 levels. So we decided to make this a manual process to kind of remind people, hey, you're about to make more complex data structures. So make sure that you're aware that it may cost performance. So going 3 levels deep in most cases is perfectly fine. And I think that Strapi should have it by default, which I know this is something that they're talking about. But for now, to work through this issue, I'm going to show you how to do this manually. So yeah, I did get a haircut, but I'm still wearing the same shirt for continuity of this video. But let's jump in and see how we could add our pricing card to our pricing component. So let's go ahead and stop our server from running, and we're going to open our project in VS Code. Once in VS Code, we're going to navigate to source, and we could find all of our components under components. Now we have our elements, and we build our pricing card, which contains our plan type, plan price, is it featured, our services, and our button link component. So what we want to do is we want to now add this component programmatically to our pricing component. So I'm going to copy this, and I'll tell you why, because this is the exact format we're going to use to add our component. So under blocks, we're going to go to pricing, and notice how under attributes, we just have our name, which is a string, and our description, which is a string. So now I'm going to go ahead and paste the snippet that we copied, and we're going to change the link to plan. It's going to be a repeatable component, which is true. And the component is found under elements, and it's our pricing card. So let's rename this accordingly. Pricing card. So now let's save our changes and restart our server by running yarn develop. Now back in our Strapi admin, let's navigate to content type builder. Under our components, we're going to take a look at pricing. And so now you could see that we have our plan, our repeatable component that we couldn't add from the admin panel. So notice we had to do it programmatically. It's not a difficult process, but it's still something that would be nice if you could do it right from the admin. And Strapi is working on changing this to allow 3 deep nesting within components to allow you to do this from the admin panel. So the last step that we have to do is we have to add our pricing block to our landing page collection type. So let's click on landing page. Let's scroll down to blocks. We're going to click add component. Using existing component, select the component, and it's our pricing block. Click finish and save. Now within our content manager, we're able to go to our landing page that we're building. Notice we have our hero block, we have our benefits row, and now we are able to add our pricing component, which allows us to add a name, cool price page, our description, some description, and now we could add a plan. We have a plan type, it's going to be free, plan price, 0 is featured. We're going to keep it false, and we're going to have service 1 is included in the free plan. Let's add service 2 as well. Now let's go ahead and add a link, or we don't have to. I'll add a link, free plan, and we're just going to say it's going to go to an endpoint called free plan, and it's external node, choose here, and we're going to make the color primary, secondary of the button. Let's keep it secondary because this is not a featured plan. So that's great. Let's go ahead and create another plan, which is going to be our pro plan. Plan price is going to be $9.99. Is it featured? Yes, everybody should sign up for the pro plan. Let's add the services. It has 1, it has service 2, and it has service 3. Awesome. And now let's add our link. We're going to call it pro plan, and then it's going to go to /pro plan. That's going to be our link. And is it external? No, keep it the same. And then we're going to make the button primary because this is going to be our featured one. So we want the button to stand out. And let's finally add our last plan, and we're going to call this enterprise. Enterprise, if I only knew how to spell, whatever. Plan price, let's have $19.99. Sounds good to me. Is it featured? No. Services is going to include all the services. 2, service 3. My cat is trying to climb onto the camera. No, kitty. No, don't lick the camera, kitty. Okay, and let's add plan 4, plan 5. I'm like task managing my cat and trying to do this tutorial. So kitty, I'm sorry. You're going to walk on my keyboard. Say hello to everyone. Say hello. Hello. I want to see what you all doing. But I'm sorry you have to go out on the floor. And okay, I'm not going to edit that part out because everybody loves cats. Am I right? No. Okay, so we add all the services. Let's click a link. It's going to be our enterprise plan. And we're going to say link is going to be enterprise plan. Fantastic. Is external node type. We're going to keep it secondary and click save. So nice. Our landing page is taking shape. What's awesome about the admin area here, for instance, maybe you want the pricing plan show up first. So you could literally move it this way. So it's drag and drop. It's pretty awesome. I'm going to move it underneath here to continue with our layout. So let's take a look. What is our final component that we have to build today? So now let's create our call to action component. And I think the way I'm going to break it down is to have a main parent component that's going to have heading and description. And then we're going to have a form component that's going to have a heading, description. We're going to make this input field be a repeatable component. And then we're going to reuse our button link to submit the form. So let's go ahead and do that. So within my Strapi application, I'm going to go to Content Type Builder, and we're going to create our input type first. So let's create a new component. We're going to call it input. Let's save it under elements, click continue, and let's add a placeholder. Add another field using text. It's going to be label, and add another one, text, input type, and let's click finish. So we have placeholder, label, input type. That's good for now. And let's click save. And now let's create our form component, create new component. We're going to call it form. It's going to be under elements again. Click continue. Our form is going to have a header, description, or we could call it call to action, whatever you want. Our input field component that we just created could be a repeatable one, and our sign up button. So let's go ahead and do that. So for our text, we're going to put heading, add another field. It's going to be another text string field. This is going to be long text. For description, let's create another field. It's going to be our input component that we just created. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's add a component. We're going to use existing component, select component. It's going to be a repeatable component. We're going to say input, and let's select our input element. Click finish. So we have our heading, description, input, and finally the last piece, we have to add our button. So let's click add another field to this component. It's going to be a component. Use an existing component, select a component. It's going to be a single component, and it's going to be our button link. And we're just going to call it link, or let's say button. For this one, click finish. Perfect. We now have our form component with our heading, description, our inputs. We could have one or many, and our button. So this is the representation of this. So we're able to add our heading, our description, our input, and our button to sign up. Fantastic. So now let's go ahead and create the parent component. We're gonna go to create new component. Let's make sure we save. And now let's go ahead and create our parent component that's gonna have our heading, description, and then our form component that we created. So under Content Type Builder, create new component, we're going to call this CTA, call to action. Let's put it in our blocks. Click continue. Text, it's going to be heading. Add another field, text. It's going to be long text, which is going to be our description. And then let's add another field, and we're going to add our components. And what do you think is going to happen right now when we click use existing component, click select component, we look for single. Notice how we are not able to see our form component that we just created. And that's because, again, of our 2-level nesting, we actually have 3 levels of nested components. So we need to add this manually. So instead, we're going to save what we have so far, click save. And within our code editor, we're going to copy this because the pattern is the same. It's going to be the name that we want to refer to. Type is going to be component. This is repeatable or not. And then we just reference the component that we want to add. So we want to go into our CTA. Inside our attributes, we want to add our form. So I'm going to call this form. It's going to be component. Is it repeatable? That's going to be false. And that is under elements, and it's called our form. So we're going to say form. Good. I'm going to make sure that our server restarts and rebuilds our project. So notice now when we refresh, we have all that information. We have our heading, description, our form with all the required information that we need. So let's go ahead and add that to our landing page. So under landing page, we're going to go under blocks, add component, use existing component, and we're going to add our CTA. Fantastic. Click finish. So now we have our little page builder area where we have our hero, row, pricing, and call to action. Let's click save. And under our content type manager, under landing page, let's click our landing page here. And we're moving along. We have our hero section done. We have our benefits done. We have our cool price page done. And let's add the final component, which is going to be our call to action. And I'm going to call this call to action. Do something now. And now we're going to add our form. And this is going to provide the data that we need to render our form on our front end, but you will still have to do additional coding on your front end to decide how you want to handle form submission. Do you want to do it with Strapi or do you want to do it through another service? But we could talk about that later when down the road I make the second part for this video. Instead of focusing on Strapi, we're going to focus on how to create the front end. So for the form, this is my form. Click today, actually sign up today if you are awesome. And then we had on our design, we only had one input field, email, but I'll show you that we could have multiple fields, and I'll show you how we could do that because we did create our input repeatable component. We're going to say this is going to be our email. For the placeholder, I'm going to say enter your email. Label is going to be email, and input type is going to be email. And let's click add entry. We're going to add another component. It's going to be enter your first name. Label is going to be full name, and then input type is going to be text. And there's many ways of doing it. I'm just showing you one approach. And I want the full name to be before the email. So perfect. Let's update this to be with a capital. Enter your email. Perfect. So now we have our two inputs for our form. Great. And now we're going to add our button link, which is going to be submit. And we could do it a couple of ways. You might have an endpoint that you hit when the submission is called. And this link could reference some endpoint that you're going to hit, some endpoint that will file your form submit, or there's other ways of handling it, but I'm just going to use that as an example. Is external false, and type, the button is going to be primary, and save. So check this out. We are done with our landing page. So before we continue, let's take a quick look and review what we have done. So we had this website mockup, and our job was to create a way to be able to represent this data inside our API. And instead of creating our API from scratch, we decided to use Strapi. So we broke this down into a couple of different components. We had our hero section, then we had our feature. We ended up breaking down into a row of cards, and then we moved on and created our pricing page. And then we went and moved on and creating our pricing plan component. And finally, we finished up with our call to action component. And the way this looks in Strapi is inside our content builder, we have our landing page, which represents that structured data. We have our title, description, we have our slug for our page. We have our metadata component that we learned how to build. And then our layout is built via blocks. What's awesome is that we could use these blocks and reuse them in any order that we choose, which is pretty awesome. So inside our content manager, if we look at our page, it consists of our basic title, description, the slug, our meta component that's going to be on every landing page, because you might have multiple for multiple different projects. And then we have this idea of blocks that we're now able to create our landing page dynamically. And what's awesome, you can reposition, and this is going to change the order in the response. So if you update it here, how you coded the project in your front end, they will update it there as well, which is pretty awesome. And if you find that like, hey, before the call to action, I want to have another row component, you could easily now get it from our blocks and you could position it where you want it to be, which is pretty awesome. And you could add your data and your cards. So I really like what we accomplished. So now that we have our initial data, I want to cover some of the cool features. So this is stored in our SQLite database that's stored locally in our file system, but you could also make a backup with our export feature. And if you somehow mess up your database, you could re-import your backup into Strapi. And then I'm going to finish up by showing you how to deploy the project to Strapi Cloud. Strapi Cloud is the easiest way to deploy your Strapi project. You can't try it for 15 days if you wanted to, but I'm still going to show you the process just so you could see how Strapi Cloud works. And what's really awesome, if you decide to go freelancing or you want to focus on building projects for clients that you're getting paid for, and you don't want to bother with the headaches of how do you deploy something, how do you manage deployment process, and you're able to push the cost of the service onto your client, Strapi Cloud is perfect fit for you. So if I were to go into freelancing again and build projects for my clients, I would literally use Strapi and my favorite framework, which is Remix. You could also use Next.js or whatever you like. and I would use Strapi as my backend, and I would always deploy to the cloud because you'll see how easy it is. And as a marketing agency, the last thing I want to focus is dealing with deployment issues. I just want to create a service for my customers and not worry about it. So for me, paying $100 a month for the service is worth it. Now, there are other ways that you could deploy this project. You could deploy it on Render. You could deploy it on DigitalOcean. So many options, and they all have their own cost. But I am going to show Strapi Cloud just to kind of show you, if you want to use Strapi Cloud in production in a business setting that is scalable and you don't have to worry about maintaining it, this is the way I recommend you go. So in our project, here we have our landing page and we have our basic data that we entered while building it. And let's say you have a lot of data and you want to make sure that you have a safe backup that you could use to restore your data if you accidentally delete it or do something crazy like that. So let me show you how you could do this in your Strapi. So locally, you could create a backup for your Strapi files. So inside my terminal, I'm going to stop my current project and I'm going to clear my screen. To export the data, we could use Strapi CLI and use the export command. You can actually take a look at the options by typing yarn strapi help export. This will go ahead and show you all the options that you have available. So let's create our backup. I'm going to run yarn strapi export. I'm going to use the no encrypt flag because we're not going to encrypt the data. And I'm going to use the file flag to give a name of what we want to save the backup. And I'm literally going to call it backup. When you click enter, it's going to go ahead and run the export. So it's going to show you all the items that it exported. And this is pretty awesome. And it has saved everything inside our backup.tar.gz file. So if we take a look, here's our backup file. So I'm going to restart my Strapi application. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be like, oh no, I accidentally on purpose deleted my data. And I'm like, that was important data for me. Like, why did I do that? So let me go ahead and show you how now I could import my data from backup. So inside my terminal, I'm going to stop my project. I'm going to clear my screen. Now I'm going to type yarn strapi help import so you could see all the options that are available. And here you could see that we have a couple of different commands. We're going to use the most basic where we're just going to type yarn strapi and the file import and use the file flag to point to the file that we want to restore. I'm going to click enter. Now it's going to ask you when you import, this will delete all the existing data. Are you sure you want to proceed? So what this is going to do is going to delete any previous data that you may have and restore from backup. So make sure that you are restoring exactly the data that you want. I'm going to click yes and enter. And it went ahead and restored all the data that I had. Now let's run yarn develop again. And back inside of our application, when I restore, check this out, our data is back. That is really cool. So before deploying our project to Strapi Cloud, let's take a look how we could populate our response to make sure that we're getting the correct data from our API. But first, let's go to settings. Under user permissions, click roles. Under public, we want to make sure that just double check that you're giving permission to be able to find one for our landing page. And because we're using our services inside our pricing page, make sure that you select find one for those as well and click save. Now, let's go into Insomnia and hit our endpoint that gets our landing pages. When I click send, notice we're getting our top level components. And what that means, if we take a look at our content builder and I click add another field, we mentioned before that our top level components, text field, rich text, number, date, Boolean, email, password, enum, JSON, and UID get populated automatically. But for media, our components and dynamic zones, those are all relations, and we have to specifically tell Strapi that those are the items that we want to populate. So in the example before, we had our metadata field. So if I wanted to populate our metadata, I needed to make sure that I tell Strapi to do so. And we used our Strapi query builder to do this as well. So if I want to populate metadata, and before I showed you an array notation for populate previously in the video, but today I'm going to show you the object notation. So we're going to say we want to populate metadata, and we want to specify which fields that we want to populate. So look in here, meta title and meta description are top level fields. They're going to be populated automatically. So what we want to populate is our meta image. So let's go ahead and populate our metadata image. And there's many different ways of doing, and you could learn more about how our populate and filtering works in our documentation. But if you also have questions, you could ask me in the comments. I love helping anyone with Strapi, so definitely don't be shy. So we're going to want to populate our metadata, and we could use our populate wildcard, which is going to populate everything to the first level deep, which is perfect for us because this is going to include our meta image component. So let's save this and let's test it inside Insomnia here and click send. So notice how we're getting our meta title, meta description, and meta image. We could be more specific. We could define what fields we want. And I'm just going to do it as an example so we know. I'm just going to say, hey, I want to get for the image, the name, alternative text, caption, and the URL. That's all I want. So this way you could control the size of your response. So let me go ahead and do that. So within our metadata, we want to populate our meta image, and we're going to say populate true. So let's test this out. Let's copy query string URL. Instead of using Insomnia, because we're making a GET request, we could just make this in the browser. So I'm going to paste that in and click enter. And notice we're getting that same data. But now I just want to return the name field, alternative text, and the URL. So let's see how we could accomplish that. So what we're going to do here is type fields and reference and pass an array of all the fields that we want. So we said we want name, alternative text, and just the URL. Perfect. And let's copy our query string. Let's paste it inside here and see what we get for our response. And when I hit enter, notice we're only getting the data that we want, which is pretty awesome. So notice how you're able to use our query parameters to really dictate and only get the data that you want, preventing overfetching and underfetching. So let's move on to populating our blocks. So looking at our Strapi application, here we have our blocks, and we want to populate our hero, row, pricing, and CTA. And we could do this by updating our query. So here under populate, underneath metadata, I'm going to type blocks, and we're going to say populate true. And let's test and see what this returns. So I'm going to copy the query to clipboard. So let me go ahead and paste our query and click enter. And here you could see that we're populating our blocks. Notice whenever we populate, it will automatically turn top level elements within our header, row, pricing page, and CTA. So now we have to populate the relationship. So inside the hero, we have to populate the link. Inside the row, we have to populate our card and the image. Inside our pricing page, we need to populate our plan and our links. And inside our call to action, we need to populate our form, our input, and our button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the full query string, and then I'm going to walk you through it to explain how it works. So taking a look at our new updated query string, I added additional items that I want to populate here within the blocks. And just as a reminder, when we do blocks populate, it's going to automatically return the top heading fields for all of our blocks for hero, row section, pricing, and CTA. So I went ahead and specified all the additional relationships that we want to return. For instance, inside the hero section, I want to make sure that I return the link and the image. Looking at our query, notice how I'm asking for a link and an image. Then looking at our row is made up of cards. So I'm specifying, hey, return all the cards with the image relation. And here I'm doing that same thing. I'm saying return all the cards and make sure you populate the image with the specific fields that we want. And we're doing the same thing for plan and the form. So if we take a look here, we are looking at our pricing page. I'm saying, hey, get all the plans, return all the services and all the links. And if we look at the query for plan, that's what I'm saying. Populate the plan and return all the services and the links. And we're doing the same thing for the forms where we're making sure we're getting our input and our button. So taking a look at our response object, notice how, and let me see if I could make this bigger a little bit. Notice for our blocks, we're getting all of our blocks. We have our hero section, we have our heading, text, link, and image. Then we have our cards, which have our row with 3 cards, which have the heading, description, and image, which correlates to our data that we're going to be using on the landing page for our benefits. And you can see for the row components, we do have all our cards with the ID, heading, description, and image, and so on. When we move down to our pricing block, we have our name, our description, we have our plan, which has 3 plans, right? It has our free plan, our pro plan, and our enterprise plan. You see the price and you see all the services that that plan includes. And in addition, you also have the link that people click. So here's the design of our landing page, and we're now getting all the data that is required to populate this. So this is pretty awesome because our API is pretty much done, and we're able to generate the data for this landing page dynamically within our Strapi admin, which is pretty exciting. So the superpower of Strapi that is highly customizable, and I want to show you one example where we're going to create a custom middleware to pre-populate our data. If we take a look at our query, it's pretty awesome, but we're passing a really huge query string into our API call from the front end. But since we know we want the landing page and we know which data that we want, we could actually pre-populate it and make sure that all we're doing is going to our endpoint and getting the data that we need. So instead of having to type this long query string that we see here, we're gonna create a middleware that's just gonna allow us to go to our API landing pages, but still populate all the data. So let me show you how that's done. In our terminal, I'm gonna stop my application, I'm gonna clear my screen, and I'm going to run yarn strapi generate, which is a CLI tool that you have available with Strapi that allows you to do cool things. So I'm going to go ahead and create a middleware that I'm going to call landing page populate. I'm going to click enter, and we're going to add it to our existing API. We're going to add it to our landing pages. And it went ahead and create a file for us in our directory. So let's open this in our VS Code and take a look what we have. So inside our Strapi project, under source, we're going to go under APIs into our landing pages. And now we could see this middleware folder where it created our landing page populate middleware. And what we're going to do, we're going to update this middleware to pre-populate our data so we don't have to do it from the front end. So let's do that now. I'm going to shrink the screen a little bit. And before I show you this example, we have this amazing article that I'll also link to in the description that you could check out that shows you exactly what we're doing here, where we're going to create a middleware to pre-populate our data. So you could read and take a look at an example here, but I'm going to walk you through the process of how to accomplish this today. So let's jump in back into our code and get to it. So first things first, let's create a variable here called populate. And it's going to be an object, and it's going to have our query object that we're going to use to pre-populate the data. This is exactly what we have here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this because we know this works. And inside my code editor, I'm going to go ahead and paste it in. Nice. Now that we have our populate query object, we could move on to the next step. Within our middleware, we have access to our context. So we're going to update our context query to inject our pre-filtered populate query object. And it's going to be an object, and we're going to pass populate, and then destructure the rest of the query. And that's all the change you have to make. So what this is going to do, it's going to go ahead and inject our query that we use to pre-populate our data, and it's going to pass it to our controller, which will return the data that we need. So the only thing we would need to do from the front end is query this page. So let's test it out. I'm going to restart the server and I'm going to refresh the screen. Wait a second, but it's not pre-populating our data. What's going on? Well, we need to add our middleware to the routes that we want to use it. So let's do that now. Within our code, let's navigate to the routes folder, open landingpage.js, and we're going to update our routes to be aware of our middleware. So here we're going to pass an object and we're going to have our configurations. We want to add configurations for find, and we also want to add configurations for find one. Both of these take middleware's key, which is going to point to an array. And I'm going to show you how to find the exact name of the middleware that we created. And we're going to do the same thing for find one. If you're not sure what's the name of the middleware that you have, you could easily look it up by using strapi console. So let me show you how this works. So I'm going to clear my screen and I'm going to run yarn strapi console. This is going to start Strapi in interactive terminal where you could look up certain things. So we have access to Strapi, and here you could see everything that's available on that object. We don't want everything. We're going to type strapi.do middleware, so we get all of them. And notice how here you could see all the middlewares that we have, including the one that we created, API : landing page populate. So let's copy the name and pass it inside our configuration here. Now let's exit. So now let's restart our application by running yarn develop. Now that our application's running, we have our middleware. Let's give it a shot, and I'm going to refresh. And notice now we get all the pre-populated data for our landing pages, which is pretty awesome. So notice how we no longer need to pass that long query string from our front end, but this is all set up on our back end. I wanted to show you that quick middleware example to show you that Strapi is highly customizable and extensible. You could customize the actual Strapi code through updating policies, middleware, services, controllers, and routes, or creating new ones. You could also create plugins that add additional functionality to Strapi that doesn't even exist. You could also check out Strapi Marketplace to see all other plugins that others have made. And that's the power of Strapi, is that with someone who's a front-end developer and doesn't know much about backend, you could start creating full-stack applications today with the power of headless CMS. And as you continue your journey to transitioning into full-stack development, or you already are a full-stack developer, you now have a starting point from which you could get started really quickly and build on top of. Now I'm going to show you how to deploy your project to Strapi Cloud. You could either follow along and try out the 14-day free trial, or you could just watch the video to get a sense of what Strapi Cloud is. In my mind, it is the easiest way that you can deploy your Strapi application to the web. There's other ways, but the reason why I like this the most is because once you deploy it, it's done. You don't have to worry about the headaches that come with managing your deployment process or fixing things when they break. So with that being said, let's see how to deploy our project to Strapi Cloud. So the first thing I want to do is save everything to GitHub. So on my GitHub page, I'm going to say new, and I'm going to create a new repository, Strapi landing page deploy, and click create new repository. Then I'm going to go ahead, copy this code, and in my local environment, I'm going to paste it in. Now I'm going to do git add to add all of our changes. Then I'm going to do git commit with a message, and we're going to say initial commit and get push. Now let's refresh. And now you see that we have successfully saved our project to GitHub. Now I'm going to go to strapi.io, and we're going to hover on cloud. And since I already have a cloud account, it's going to take me to log in with GitHub. If not, it's going to ask you to authorize your GitHub account. You could sign up for free. And when you do use Strapi Cloud, you can try it for 14 days free. So I'm going to say log in with GitHub. So I'm going to click create project. And I already used up my free trial. So I'm going to go with the 99 per month plan. I'm going to select the repository, Strapi landing page. Make sure we click it. And next, we want to give it a name. I'm going to say test deploy. And I'm going to stick with US region since I'm located in US. You do have access to advanced settings, but we don't really need to add anything. All our basic variables are going to be set up automatically. And I'm going to say continue to billing. You will need to provide your information. And once you have everything, you will click create project. And this is going to go ahead and deploy your project. Once this is done, we'll take a look at the next step. During the deployment process, you're going to see the build logs and your application building. So that way, if anything goes wrong, you'll be able to spot it here. But I'll be back once this is done. Now that our project finished deploying, we can see the build logs, and we could also see the deployment logs in real time. So now I'm going to go to my Strapi Cloud account, click on my test deploy, and I'm going to click visit our app. Because it's our first time logging in, we're going to have to go into admin, and it's going to ask us to create our first admin user. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to say paul.bratzlavsky@strapi.io. And this time, because it is deployed on actual internet, you want to make sure that you do use a secure password that you don't share with anyone. So I'm going to do that. It is no longer monkey1234 like it was before. And it's going to ask what type of work did you do. I'm going to say front-end developer and finish. And now here we are inside our application. And what's awesome is that if you take a look inside your content manager, you can go ahead and see that we're able to create a new landing page, and we have all those blocks available to us to do so. Now, so we could better see this app, I'm going to go ahead into profile and change it to light mode and click save. So what I'm going to show you as the final step of our deployment process is how to take your data from your local environment and push it to cloud. So notice right now, when we look under Content Manager, we don't have any data here. But if we take a look at our local project, and if we take a look at our local project running on our machine, and let me change this to dark mode so we know which one is local and which one's on the cloud. So profile, let's go dark mode. So dark mode is going to be our local setup, and light mode is our project deployed in the cloud. If you look under Content Manager, we already have our Strapi landing page that's published that has all the items that we have. So I want to now go ahead and move all this data to Strapi Cloud. So let me show you how to do that. Within your Strapi Cloud application, you're going to go into settings, and you're going to go under transfer tokens, and you're going to create a new token. We're going to call this upload. And for duration, we're going to do 7 days because I'm just going to do it for today. And the token type, you could either push, pull, or full access. Because if you're pushing data to our Strapi Cloud account, I'm going to say push. Click save. It's going to go ahead and create your token. We're going to save this for later because we're going to use it. And we also need our deployed API here, which is our URL/admin. So let me copy that first. Now, this is my local computer, and I'm in my terminal. This is the project that we just built today. I'm going to clear my screen, and I'm going to run yarn strapi help transfer. This is going to show you how to use the transfer command to push data to an external deployed Strapi Cloud project or any project deployed somewhere on the web. So we need to add the to destination and the token. So now let's go ahead and run our Strapi transfer command. I'm going to type yarn strapi transfer, and we're going to add our to flag, which is going to have the URL that we want to push our data to, which is going to be our deployed address/admin. So let's copy that address and paste it in. Then click enter. It's going to ask you to enter the transfer token for your Strapi destination. So make sure you copy your token and click save. I'm going to go ahead and paste it in and click enter. And it's going to give you a message saying that transfer will delete all the existing data from the remote Strapi. Are you sure you want to proceed? So make sure you're only pushing the data that you want, because it's going to replace everything that you might have had existing on your Strapi Cloud. Because this is a new install, we're not really worried. But if you're working in production, typically what you would do, you would pull your changes first, make the changes, and then push it back to the cloud. So I'm going to say yes and enter. And it's going to go ahead and say, warning, review workflow feature does not exist on source. This is perfectly fine because we're not using Enterprise Edition, and workflows is only available for the Enterprise Edition or our team plan and not the Pro plan. I'm just going to say yes and continue. It's going to go ahead and transfer all our data. Once the transfer is complete, back in our cloud account, I go to Content Manager, and notice we have our data and it's published. So look how easily we were able to deploy our application and move our data from our local environment to our production environment. I think that is really, really awesome. Finally, let's test out if our Strapi application works. I'm going to go into settings and give permissions under roles. We're just going to double check under public that our landing page that we have find and find one. And again, because we imported the data and we already had those settings preset, we have it here. But if you're not getting the data, this is the first place you check. And let's check on the services. Yes, we are giving permission to be able to give access to our endpoint. Let's click save. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the URL. And again, this project is deployed and I'm going to keep it deployed. So whenever you watch this video and you want to see the API return, you could check it out yourself. So let's test it out here inside Insomnia. I'm going to paste the deployed project URL and I'm going to say API landing pages and click send. And notice how we're getting all of our data from our response. This is awesome. And notice how we no longer have to pass our long query string in order to populate our data, because today we saw how you could pre-populate your data within your middleware, which is pretty awesome. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Today we took a look how to create data for a landing page website, and you could create any website that your heart desires. But today I just wanted to show you how to structure data for your landing page website, which will allow you to have multiple landing pages that you could structure dynamically within your Strapi admin application to receive all the JSON data that you need for your front-end application. So my challenge to you is go ahead and build your own Strapi API and let me know on Twitter or this YouTube video on the comments with the link to your application and the cool front-end project that you built. Now in this video, I only wanted to cover just the Strapi portion of it. So we didn't take a look on how to build your front end. But what's pretty awesome, we now have a working API and you could go ahead and create your front end or your application with whatever technology you want. So I'm going to use Remix to create the front end for this that I'm going to make and release in another video separate from this. But you could use Next.js, you could use Astro, you could use Vue, you could even create a mobile powered app either with Flutter or React Native and using Strapi to power your application to deliver the data that you need. So if you like this video, smash the like button. If you have any questions, 100% ask them in the comments. I'm also going to share a link to the Strapi Discord, where they do Monday through Friday, 12:30 p.m. CST time, open office hours, where you could learn and ask more questions about Strapi. But anyway, thank you so much for watching the video. Lots of love. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.